will tell Sam this repeatedly, although I think he's hearing it loud and clear, as well as our Senator Melinda Bush. Now, keep in mind, we have a lot of freshmen down in Springfield right now, so I think there's some issues that are being revisited or revamped, but I think I'm happy to report that the freshmen seem to be holding strong, so I am optimistic that this too will be worked out and shot down as it was in the past. But as you can see, the legislative committee from the Lake County Municipal League and the board of directors will be heading to Springfield in April, and I will be one of those people. I serve on the board in the legislative league, and I like to consider myself very pleasantly persistent, and I assure you all that I will be very pleasantly persistent in my whole time down in Springfield discussing these issues. Let's talk about shoveling sidewalks. We visited this issue a couple of years ago, if you recall. In fact, I pulled out a copy of the Snow and Ice Removal Act, which we even put in the newsletter, and it's basically what we've fallen back on to discuss snow removal. And residents called, were upset that certain residents were choosing not to shovel their sidewalks. The police were called. The police were going to go out and issue warnings. You know, 2 years ago, or a little over 2 years ago, we had just switched police agencies. We weren't sure about where we wanted to go with this. And it does also involve a commitment on the village's part, because if we're going to enforce an ordinance or consider an ordinance, I want to remind everybody there are common areas of sidewalk that are nobody's responsibility but the village's. So that would obligate us to rise to the occasion as well. But hearing the different grievances, I think it's something worth exploring. I talked to Chief Perlini, and he was more than happy to send somebody out to give warnings. The issue is when you give warnings, a lot of people would hear, but you might get somebody who would question it or choose to ignore it. And the question is, how far do you want to take this? And if you do, what do you have that really has teeth in it? And do you want to go to fining, and what are those fines, etc.? As most of you, if not all of you, are aware, we did a community outreach call today to the community, asking people that have not shoveled to please get the snow cleared, be considerate of their neighbors and their community, and also, or if there is ice, to put salt down. Some of that is well received, some of that is not. I continue to scratch my head because people say we don't communicate. We do a newsletter, we have a website, we do community outreach calls, we try not to be obnoxious, but how do you want to be communicated to? And this is an issue that I will be talking about at the town hall meeting and asking people to speak up and say what they want. I had 2 residents, one came in person, one called up. They're upset because they got a community outreach call yesterday about the forum, and one again today about shoveling snow. I don't know what else we can do to communicate this type of information. I also had a resident come into the foyer that was upset about the holiday decorations being enforced. I want you to know that our building official went out and issued warnings. Warnings only. No fine, no nothing. It is a written warning. He comes back 1 week later. A lot of people had him down. He wrote a ticket to those who did not. Those who did not, again, do it in another week's time, got a second ticket. I had a resident who received a warning and 2 tickets come in, talk to the staff. I went out to speak to this resident in the foyer, and their claim was they didn't know. I asked when they moved here. They have lived here over a year. We have a website, we have a newsletter. I said, I know you get a utility bill, do you not read the newsletter? And even if you live in a townhome and don't get a utility bill, you do get mailed the newsletter. The reply was, I never read that. Well, that's not our problem. I don't mean to sound harsh, but people, what do you want us to do? There has to be a happy medium here with the communication. We received other phone calls this afternoon. We had a resident very irate, very upset, complaining about residents that are feuding in the Misty Hill subdivision over shoveling snow. They are putting snow on each other's sidewalks because they're so angry at each other. This is not an issue to come here. That's an issue that needs to go to the police department, number one. Then I was told that somebody's child fell and broke their arm, and they are threatening to sue that property owner, and they are also threatening to sue the village. For the record, I have not received any call. We have not been threatened to be sued. I am not concerned about being threatened to be sued because while you can sue anybody for anything, under the Snow and Ice Removal Act and tort immunity, the village is protected. That's not the concern. Certainly we want to try to keep everybody safe. So that is what has brought this issue to the front lines.
I think the question that is misunderstood, I don't know that there's an answer. There is probably, but a lot of people are misinformed. The question is that people have heard, if you don't shovel your sidewalk, then you're not liable if somebody hurts themselves. But if you do, then that makes yourself liable. And I think that's something that we need Jim to clear up and put in the newsletter so that people know.
Well, here's what it was in the newsletter in the past. We'll republish it again.
I mean, they're not liable if,
They're not liable. No. The Snow and Ice Removal Act, I'm not going to read the whole thing. But the General Assembly therefore determines that it's undesirable for any person to be found liable for damages due to his or her efforts in the removal of snow or ice from such sidewalks, except for acts which amount to clear wrongdoing, some malicious intent or sort. And it goes on and on. But it clearly does, there is no liability that somebody can be sued for that. And if that were the case, the municipalities could be sued here in the Midwest. The state of Illinois would have had the problems it's having years ago. We would already be gone. So that is, you're correct, that's not true. But again, you say we need to let people know. We've tried.
I know, but
people don't read.
I know. I just think it's something that, you know, advertisers realize that they can't just put an ad in once and expect people to respond. That we have to do it more than once to get them.
You're right. The water trickle effect, which we do with a lot of things. But we also do have people that don't read the newsletters.
I understand.
Yeah.
There's no question.
We have people that don't visit the website.
We still have to do it.
We do still have to do it. I do want to bring up one other point because I am not going to harp on this long. This is really not on tonight's agenda, number one. I'm mentioning it because Grays Lake does have a provision in their code, and I sent forwarded that language to Jim Rock, and basically what it says in a nutshell is that a property owner has 24 hours after the storm event ends to clear the snow. So in this recent storm, by the time it ended, really they would have had a total of about 48 hours. In this kind of event, you really should be shoveling several times. And Village of Hainesville and Grays Lake and most municipalities or PDs historically, even though we say 24 hours or the timeline is 30 days, we usually put in a little room, a wiggle room, okay? Before we really go out and start issuing citations, and we'll usually almost always start with a warning. So I think it's worth looking at, and Jim is going to review the language and get some other input and come back to us with his thoughts and a possible ordinance. The other thing that Jeff has marked out for me, and this would go in our packet, so I'm going to pass it up and down for the trustees to see. He has highlighted the key areas that are common sidewalks that are no man's land as far as a resident shoveling. We're not going to do areas where it's a recreational area. We do already clear the bike path that goes down Hainesville Road in Washington, and that's a courtesy because residents do use that as a way to get to the train or to Walgreens. but we're not going to do bike paths or little paths that take you to the various parks. But we do want to make sure that the residents can walk down the street, that parents and children and guardians can get to the bus stops. So there is some areas that would have to be cleared, and Jeff is going to give me some more detailed information as we explore this further of what he would think it would take approximately in time and effort. So if you want to start that down at this end and then pass it back this way. So my recommendation is let's think on this. Let's see what we get brought to the table. And I'm going to use this to lead into something which I didn't anticipate. I didn't plan this today. Yeah, Jared.
Quick question for Jim.
Microphone.
Quick question for Jim. I think Georgianne asked him, I don't know if we're getting the answer. Is there personal liability for someone who does not shovel?
That would be up to a court, but there's no law that establishes liability for failure to shovel. There's just a statute that establishes an exemption from liability if you do shovel.
Okay.
So the question about is someone liable if they don't, well, that would not be for me to decide. It would be,
Undecided at this point.
that would be, well, it'd be a judge or a jury, and
Okay.
frankly, that's the kind of thing that if you don't do it, that could happen.
But if we put an ordinance in, to make it mandatory to shovel, then every resident would be liable.
No, that wouldn't create any additional liability for
But you're
the.
telling them they have to do it, or you're gonna get a ticket.
Well, that's.
Well, they would liable for the
that's their
responsibility, but
liability.
they wouldn't be liable for an injury that occurred on their sidewalk. If
I mean,
had
they wouldn't
shoveled.
be any more liable for an injury under those circumstances than they would be. You're talking about if they did not do anything.
I don't
for
know
the
what
time.
I'm saying.
If they don't do it now,
Right.
or they don't do it after there's an ordinance in place, neither one of those conditions.
No, I think Gary
So
said
the
to
only thing we're gaining is by putting an ordinance is that we're gonna get revenue from it.
Well,
Not necessarily, not
The goal
necessarily.
is not to get revenue, the goal is to motivate those people that for whatever reason, it boggles my mind, that choose not to shovel or snow plow, I mean with a snow blower, I should say, or hire somebody if they can't. I mean, there's plenty of kids in this community that I think would be willing to make a few dollars to shovel. In fact, I was somewhat shocked at one person I was talking to that she confessed to me that she has a 12-year-old son, and yet she hasn't shoveled. I think he should have shoveled, but what do I know?
Sure. I have one question though.
Yeah.
The sidewalk, where do our property lines actually end and where do the sidewalks lie as far as the ownership of?
It's your property line, your pins.
Your pins are on the sidewalk before or after? Your pins, right?
Yeah.
Where your pins are usually located?
Well, there's a grass, the pin corner meets the sidewalk, that's the end of your,
Is it the other, so it's the, well, which?
your sidewalk runs the front of your property, the front boundary.
Okay, I'm not sure because I don't understand.
That's easement though, is it not?
Isn't that easement?
Yes, it is in any community, yeah. That doesn't prevent you from having a snow shoveling ordinance.
Because I know in Chicago, your property actually ends at the beginning of the side. Your side of the sidewalk.
While that may be true,
I'm just wondering.
municipalities still can enforce an ordinance
Okay, well,
requiring the property owner.
What I'm looking at is something like in Chicago, a lot of times when they said, it's not my sidewalk. It's there. And that's what I'm saying, is
It won't matter.
That argument won't do them any good.
okay, well, I'm just, that's what I've had in the
Yeah,
past.
it won't matter.
So,
We'll have questions no matter what.
right.
My goal actually is not to get revenue out of this. The revenue would be peanuts. My goal is, and it's sad to say, I mean, 2 years ago when we were having this discussion, we really did want and did feel that we wanted to take on the responsibility of clearing the common areas. And I thought with promoting the Snow and Ice Shovel Act, that we